the aim of the game really is to make it as seamless as possible for your customers, so they don't really notice anything.
Welcome to the Real eCommerce podcast, your go-to for straight talk and smart tips from the world of online retail.
Seamless commerce migration. So go on, you said it a second ago. Seamless for who?
Seamless for the end customer, probably not for you.
Yeah.
But
And
we want to make
why aren't they seamless? What's the unseamless part of migrations?
Well, you are changing the way that your entire business works and everything about it. And that includes a lot of complications. And the aim of the game really is to make it as seamless as possible for your customers, so they don't really notice anything.
Well, they're complex things, aren't they? Migrations, data migrations are complex things. There are companies that provide specific services that do this, agencies that support this, businesses that do this when they're moving platform. But yeah, that's seamless for your customer is a good place to start, because for you, they're going to be quite a complex thing and something that you'll do multiple times when you're moving from one platform to another.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess the key thing to kind of discuss first maybe is why someone might migrate from one platform to another. And I think I can think of a couple. I think I can think of a couple. I was trying to think of a few before this. I can't think of any others. So if you can think of any, then please add them. So the first one, of course, is usually when we're building a new e-commerce site for a client, and of course that will typically then mean that they're going to move over to a new platform, because they might feel that they've either outgrown their current platform, so maybe they were on Squarespace and they're now ready to go up to one of the big boys, or maybe their current platform isn't cutting it and they want to kind of move to a different one to kind of get features and functionality.
Well, like people who are on VisualSoft, right? Poor VisualSoft customers, they can't take advantage of latest technologies or anything.
So they'll want to move to a better platform like Squarespace, probably.
Well, that would be a step up, wouldn't it? Yeah, so taking advantage of latest technology, I think, is one of the big reasons people move platform in the first place. Yeah. They might be stifled. The innovation of the business might be stifled. Taking advantage of new third-party services, again, all big reasons to move. It may be a cost-based thing, but alongside that re-platform, we've got the data side of things. The data we collect and the processes we create as we grow as a business, I think some people forget a little bit about all of the data that they're starting to collect within either their services, their third-party services. So, think about things like loyalty points or referral codes, discount codes. These all add up. You might have things in a PIM, things in an ERP, things in an account system. So beginning to map out where all of that data sits, that's going to be a big part of any move, to understand that first. Yes, you're moving platform for certain reasons, and you may have other third-party platforms or services that support you in your e-commerce ecosystem, and we need to think about where all that data sits for all of those.
Absolutely. And I think it's very much, and it's just, goes for many things in life, is that the planning is probably one of the most important parts.
Yeah. The less time you spend in the drawing room, the less sledgehammers you have to use when you're actually doing it.
Yeah. Nice. I like that. I'm going to use that.
I've stolen it from someone else. It's not one of mine. But part of that's choosing the right platform. I mean, we could do a whole nother podcast on this. If you're on VisualSoft, obviously you want to choose another platform. Completely understand that. But, moving between popular platforms isn't uncommon. There are other things to consider, like moving over the design, moving over the theme. And any other things that you think in terms of the choosing the right platform that we might want to consider?
But it's mostly longevity and the functionality that's provided, and whether more functionality is generally provided along the way. It's the whole kind of ecosphere. I think that's the right word.
Yeah.
Around the platform. So you want to make sure that you're going to be supported not just by the actual platform itself, but by other third-party suppliers, whether that's apps, agencies. You want to make sure
And,
that people are going to be able to support you
and
in
part of your
those.
consideration might be that the platform actually has tools to help you migrate the data. That might be part of your selection process.
Yeah, and also on that as well. So of course you are quite often when you're choosing an e-commerce platform, there's going to be other services you're going to be plugging into it. So one of those services might be a subscription platform, and quite often those services will cost additional money for you. It's quite often a significant amount of money in your kind of subscription, and because of that,
Mm-hmm.
they will quite often provide migration services as part of their service. And I don't mean just kind of just a platform, just and you've got to kind of do it all. I mean they literally have teams to help you migrate. So it's quite often worth checking those out as well, or seeing what services they provide around the migration. Because if someone else is going to do it for you, then and and take the risk on as well, then fantastic, get someone else to do it.
But even then, if somebody else is going to do the lifting for you, you still need to get your ducks in a row, as it were, because they're not going
Yeah.
to be able to help with data that you don't know where it is or that's incorrectly ordered or sorted.
No,
So yeah, they might do the lifting, but you're still going to have a considerable amount of work to do yourself.
absolutely. So, I mean, overall, the whole migration project itself, you're going to want to have a control over that, and you're going to know what's happening at each stage. Um, but if there's various elements of that, like the subscription example, and someone else is going to take over that part,
Mm-hmm.
then brilliant. It's
So
a
you can
football.
kind of like microservice it out to the third party provider to help you just move that one element.
Exactly, yeah.
So when you're planning the migration, yes, we're going to assess the platform, strengths and weaknesses of the platform, but determining what features and data you want to keep or improve, I guess, is quite important, because we're going to have the feature in the new platform to map the data to.
Hmm.
And there might be some data sets that you're underutilizing. That why make the migration heavier than it needs to be if you don't actually want to use that data now or in the future?
Yeah, exactly. Why do work that isn't going to be used? So, if exactly as you say, if there's data there which isn't going to be needed on the new site, don't even bother moving it.
Well, one
Uh,
of the areas that people used to beef out, was like the customer specific information. So that might be dietary requirements, birthdays, pets' birthdays, whatever it is, depending on what you sell. They all get loaded into like the my
yeah,
customer account section. If you're not using those to segment your marketing, and you've got no plan to, what's the point in moving all of that data across?
yeah. So don't.
Make it lighter, make it easier.
Yeah,
We've got to set some objectives as well. So you're going to have some migration goals for why you're moving platform in the first place: better user experience, more improved functionality, better performance. But on a data migration, like establishing a real budget or realistic budget and time frame, like these are complex things, and they normally have multiple migrations as part of that. It's not just we do it once and that's the end of it.
yeah,
So having a budget for moving this data across as part of your platform migration, and also setting a timeline to do sort of initial migrations, top up migrations, and then one before you go launch. These are all things that need to be kind of established, right?
yeah. So, I mean, one of the things I was thinking about is that what do we even consider the migration as being? Is it just that part that we are moving it over the data, or is it the whole thing of the whole project end to end, which would usually involve um, considering what would be on the new site, whether there's going to be any changes. There's so many
Mhm.
different things to kind of consider here. And I think the point is a migration is rarely done in kind of isolation. It's not just okay, we're going to just move everything over to Shopify or whatever, and then that's it. It's usually part of a much bigger project of okay, we're going to effectively create a new website here, and as part of that, we've got that kind of migration process. Um, and I think the earlier that you kind of think in that process about the migration, the better, because there's going to be lots of different things that maybe don't kind of, it might be the case that you decide on your new website that yeah, you want to have kind of reviews against these products, and you might be using Trustpilot at the moment, and I've and you might want to be using a new review platform. And as far I might be wrong on this, by the way. As far as I know, with Trustpilot, they effectively own those reviews, so you can't like export them and put to another. Other platforms you can. So you need to be thinking about these things kind of right straight up. Is this going to work with 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 the plan for the new website?
Yeah, so you're not just saying it's platform to platform. There could be third-party service to third-party service, a migration taking place at the same time. One reviews provider to another, one subscription provider to another,
Yeah,
and that needs the migration element thought about as well. We'll come on to it a bit
absolutely.
later. I think what we're going to try and create is like a data mapping tool, so people start to be able to realize where all their data is stored, and like a tool that we can share with you. But in terms of the data sets, there's obviously the simple ones, products, categories, customers, orders. I think it's the ones that as the business grows, you suddenly start forgetting about. It could be credit limits. Where are they stored? Are they in the account system? Are they stored on the site? Wish lists. Do we want to move those over? You've spent loads of time getting customers curate wish lists, and then all of a sudden they're not there.
Yeah.
Marketing preferences, like you said, reviews. There could be quotes. Again, if you're like in the B2B space, all of those quotes that again you've created over the months and years of trading, you don't suddenly want to not be able to access those, or the customer to be able to access those. And then a big one's loyalty points. I know you've got an example there.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I've got an example. So there is a website that I'm a customer of. I'm not going to mention who it is, probably because if they realise, then I might not get the benefits I'm currently about to explain. Yeah, that particular website. So I'd incurred quite a few loyalty points, and they recently migrated over to Shopify. I'd noticed, and this must have been about 4 or 5 months ago now, maybe a little bit longer. And I logged into my account and looked at the loyalty points. And I don't know what happened. I suspect maybe a calculation's been done wrong. Something's gone wrong in their migration, effectively. And I have far more loyalty points than I should have, which means that pretty much on every single order that I make through this website, I can take about 20. I think there's a maximum you can get of £20, I think, because you have to convert them into a voucher and then use that voucher. But I think I've got enough for them maybe the next 5 orders now. And I think
Is
I
it
only
something
start.
exciting or really boring, like toothpaste?
It's um it's relatively exciting. But I'm not going to say.
No, fair
Not
enough.
for reasons that you might, let's not probe too far into this.
Would you be able to use it all within a year, do you think?
Yeah, probably. But, I mean, maybe this could be, something in the comments below. What is Jamie ordering?
Oh no. But in real terms, that business has effectively just given away
Yeah,
more money and have a bigger liability set on the balance sheet of extra points that customers didn't earn. You didn't get any communication that said, "Oh, we're going to double your points" or anything as we've moved over.
no,
So really, this is a financial loss to the business that they to this day they've still not picked up on.
no, they haven't. They were. I can't remember what they were. Obviously, one of the things that tends to happen for me is when I come across a Shopify website, especially when someone's, and it's one that I've used, I'll be kind of looking for little things. And I remember there were some other issues with it. I wish I can remember them.
Hmm.
But I did actually email the customer service team at the time saying, "Oh, by the way, did you know this? We specialize in Shopify. I found these things." But no, there were clearly a couple of issues with said website. I wish I could tell you who it was, but yeah.
Well, as well as loyalty points, you might have data that's stored in other systems. You've got an account system, ERP. You might have other things that run databases to manage customer marketing and things like that. So again, this mapping tool I think is going to help
Yeah.
with you understanding what data are you holding, where are you holding it, does it need to stay where it is, does it need to move to the new platform. We don't want to be moving data from one platform to another if it's already centrally stored in something like an ERP.
I think the other thing as well is that quite often, and it's by no fault of their own. Um, People don't always fully realise, or they just forget that there's certain data that we need to think about. So it's quite easy to kind of fall into the trap of just thinking about this as just like a normal website move. You've just got the products that we have to think about. It's the things that you see on the front end of the site. We just need to migrate the products. But people do often, and I've seen it happen recently, forget that actually, yeah, there's customers and there's customer data, and then there's the orders. Customers need to be able to log in and see their previous orders. That previous order data might be being used by the system to then generate the analytical data that we need as well.
Yeah, or
Um,
upsells or recommendations and things like that.
yeah, there's a load of data on there which is important and can just get forgotten about really.
And this is one that I never truly know the answer to, but when's the best time to optimize and cleanse that data for migration? Is it like some people say, look, move it all over and then cleanse it in the new system, or cleanse it first and then move it? Like, what would be your recommendation?
I would usually do it kind of in between. So don't do it on the new system. Don't do it in the old system. The way I would there's different ways of doing this, of course, but the way I would typically want to do a migration is the way where you export all of that data and you've got it there visually in a CSV spreadsheet, whatever, and then you can kind of do your manipulations at that point. So, say for example, there's discrepancies in whether weights are stored with kilograms or pounds. I know that's an example you're familiar with. You could then go through that data in that spreadsheet at that point. And for certain things as well, you can also use formulas in the spreadsheet to kind of manipulate that data to get it to how it needs to be,
Mhm.
and then import it into the new system there. So, um, yeah, I think if you do it in the currently live system, in this fictitious migration I'm now thinking of in my head, then you run the risk of messing something up that's running on the live site. There might be things that are kind of um, that might be depending on that data being in that way. Um, you could, I guess, actually do it on if you're running the new website in parallel with the old website before you put it live. Yeah, you could then sort the data out there on that side.
Mhm.
Um,
And I
but I
guess
don't
it
know.
depends
I
if you're
just have a
using
preference
like
for
a
doing it kind of
if you're using
visually.
like a third party tool to do it or a third party service to do it. You don't have that luxury of manipulating in the middle, do you?
No, so that I mean, there are a number of different options
Mhm.
there, as you say. There's a number of different sort of software as a service providers where you give them the credentials to the old store, the credentials to the new store, and then you press a big magical button, and the data then appears in the new store.
Yeah. But
Which I
that
think
the
can work.
organization of that data, like that's kind of up to you, right? The example I had was like we've had before where someone's got weight and gross weight. They were both exactly the same thing, but in one of them you got pounds, one of them you got kilos, and they just want that moved over to weight.
Yeah,
Um, well, we've got two attributes trying to put data into one attribute. So again, that cleansing and that data organization needs to be done before you could use one of those automated migration tools, because it's not going to know what maps to what. Whereas
yeah,
if you've got the spreadsheet in the middle option, like you just discussed, then you can do that. You can concatenate the cells and you can have one figure for weight quite easily, and then import that.
absolutely. I mean, to my mind, I just like having that kind of visual way of doing it. I don't really like the idea of having a third party kind of doing things behind a closed door and
Mhm.
then it then
You've got
appears
more
in the new
control
store.
over it.
Exactly, yeah.
But
Well,
that comes down to like choosing the right tool. So we've said we've got kind of manual or guided CSV import
yeah,
export tools, which is, I guess what you're talking about there. There's third party migration services. Some developers might do it API, system to API system. There's, what would you say are the pros and cons of each? I'll take the third party migration services because we've had a fair bit of experience with those. Do you want to start with the CSV one? What's the pros and cons of the CSV or guided CSV import exports?
Sure, but the one I've gotten the most experience with is one called Matrixify,
Mm.
which is an app for Shopify. Um, to my mind, it's very good. I'm not being sponsored by them, by the way, but they are very good. You can install it on one store, and then they give you a code to be able to then have it. So you don't have to buy two subscriptions. You have it on one store, and the other store is all included in the same subscription. And then you can choose which data to export, and it exports it into a massive CSV file, and then you can import it into the next one. And it because it's quite embedded into Shopify. It just knows how to kind of get everything right. Now the thing is the main drawback is, yeah, it's a big manual process. You're literally having to export all this data out, and they have guides, by the way, on how to do it from other platforms. They have some really extensive guides for Magento, WooCommerce, etc., to then bring that into Shopify. Um, the main drawback, of course, is a big manual process. You're going to be responsible for making sure that you've got all the right data. Um, and there's a fair few kind of like manual bits and bobs that you're going to need to do as well. To be fair, though, there's going to be manual things that you need to do anyway. Like there's certain things like shipping rates, other things in Shopify, you just can't do it kind of automated. You have to do it manually.
But these are going to do the heavy lifting of most of the common data sets, right?
Exactly.
And like con-wise, are there any platforms that aren't supported? I mean, Visualsoft might be one, of course, but any other sort of smaller platforms or you know?
Do you know, the ones that we've done have been supported.
Mm.
I seem to remember. I think Shopify provide their own app for migrating across from smaller platforms,
Mhm.
like
Squarespace or Wix or
Squarespace.
something.
Exactly, yeah.
Mhm.
But there's still kind of drawbacks on those ones. You know, there's things that you can't do. Like it's very difficult to migrate across subscriptions. That's a whole other subject I'm sure we'll get onto shortly. But I guess the main con with doing it in this way is just all on you. You know, it's a massive
Yeah,
it's a
it's like a
massive
guided, self-help thing, isn't it?
yeah.
Manual
But
process.
the main positive is you have full control over it.
Mhm.
But again, that could also be a negative, depending which way you're looking at it.
Well, the automated ones, I don't think provide a huge amount more reassurance because, like, much as they handle that process for you and you provide them access to both stores, they help with the mapping of which attributes and things map to the new data sets in the new platform. You have no visibility of what's going on in the middle there, and every time data isn't put into the right place, you've kind of got to do that import process again. So it's not just a case of moving over that one set again. Quite often you've got to do the full import again to do that.
Yeah.
The other kind of con with those is you're beholden to their timescales. So much as it seems very simple that you go onto a website, you get the credentials, you upload a file to each site, and then the system can work independently in the middle, there are still people scurrying behind in the background that are mapping those data sets, moving those data sets over, and then finding out errors and working with you to resolve those to move it across. So much as there's not the onus on you of actually moving the data, there is still other people behind the scenes that are doing it on your behalf, and if it's not right, it then falls to you to help them correct it and move it over. So there's lots of third party automated services out there that make it sound very simple, but if we go back to where we were right at the start, these are complicated things. They're seamless for your customer. They're very rarely going to be seamless for you unless you have a very basic data set and very basic requirements.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So there's quite a lot of challenges. Let's just list a couple of those. Migrating data is never easy. One of my most hated ones is HTML markup in text content. So you might have a description where you've added a table, or you've pulled in an image from a third party, or you've used any other HTML markup. Quite often when these move across, they might be unsupported by the new platform. They may not be able to access the resource that you're pulling through in the HTML. So again, pulling it out into CSV will allow you to then strip that sort of thing out relatively easy. Whereas if you're using an automated migration service, they're just going to plumb one to the other. So that's kind of a big one there.
Absolutely, and I think that it can also be a challenge within platforms like Shopify, just because they have apps like Shogun Page Builder
Mm.
that generate their own kind of HTML markup, and then you need to make sure you've got the app there to do that. Um, I think the challenge I kind of mentioned earlier, which I think is definitely worth bringing up again, is the subscriptions.
Mm.
That can be if you think about the fact that, and again, we're talking about all the complications of all the different moving parts that we have with an e-commerce site. With a subscription, you've got all these different customers where we're holding their credit card details. Well, we're not holding; a third party's holding their credit card details securely, and we are firing off requests on a regular basis to take a payment and then create an order. And there's a lot of scope for things to go wrong there. And the things that make it even more complicated is the whole kind of credit card part of it. So typically, what will happen is it will be. Well, I say typically. I say quite often. There's other platforms use other things, but quite often platforms will use Stripe. Stripe has a system for securely holding those credit card details, and then obviously taking those payments. And they have basically a token which we can use to request those payments. The big complication, I seem to be mentioning Shopify quite a lot here. It's almost like I work with Shopify quite a lot. But the biggest complication was where Shopify moved from. They didn't have their own subscription platform. Other platforms had to provide it kind of externally, like Recharge and others. Then Shopify moved everything into Shopify, which then meant we were in this big mess. Where it was okay, how do we handle subscriptions now, especially ones which we're importing in? And we
So what
have
you're
to do a
saying is
very
all of those subscriptions are handled in the third party like Stripe, and now it's going to become native in the platform. And what's the continuity of being able to move those over, right?
yeah, exactly. Just how do you do that? It's a really difficult one. We did a migration from Squarespace to Shopify. Luckily, Squarespace uses Stripe, but Squarespace provide zero documentation, zero kind of input, anything. And there was, at the time anyway, there's nothing on the internet about how you can migrate their subscriptions across. It's literally impossible. But we managed to find a way by exporting the data from orders, linking it up to customers, then linking it up to the data in Stripe, and then putting that into Shopify. I think we were using Recharge for that one. So that can be a very, very difficult area to do, which is
Well,
exactly why I said it earlier that if you're using a subscription service who will do it for you, get them to do it for you because it is difficult.
well, we've seen it with a third party, haven't we? Skio, I think is the one.
Yeah, that was it.
So
Yeah,
they've been using Stripe behind the scenes to power Skio, so it was
yeah,
quite easy that all the old subscriptions would continue to run on Skio, and then if the customer changed a subscription or signed up for a new subscription, it would then be powered by
yeah,
Shopify. So in some cases, you can kind of leave it running with the third party. You don't have to migrate it over, but knowing that all new subscriptions will run through the new service.
yeah,
And
exactly.
it's just mapping out things like that. It's all very well thinking, yeah, we've got the products, customers, orders. It's the bits like this that
Yeah.
actually make those migrations much more complex.
It's
Um,
the importance in that planning and planning the when you're going to do each of those bits as well. Like what relies on what, and what do you need to do first? What do you need to do after what?
Part of it might be like SEO preservation or SEO rankings during the migration. That's quite a big one. So, most businesses are proud and want to maintain their organic rankings on search engines. So, how do we move across the URL structure? Are there any redirects that are required? When we're using these automated tools, what about if they're, again, to Shopify example, but they inject their own structure into the URL structure? So how are we going to make sure that when that carries over, whether that be products or categories, that continuity is there? You might have a blog that's on a separate system, separate to your e-commerce system, like perhaps a WordPress blog with a Magento store. Again, we need to move those over under the one umbrella. Perhaps you've gone for a platform that does it all. And those structures again might change because you've got blog folders or you've got categories within the blog content. Um,
the SEO part is incredibly important, and is another one of those bits that people will quite often miss. And an example of as to why it's so important is because you might rank incredibly well for a particular keyword. You might not even know it, and you're getting a significant amount of organic traffic coming through for that keyword, which is then turning into customers. And if that gets messed up and you lose that ranking, you could potentially be losing a huge source of customers that you have at the moment. So one of the things that we would quite often do with the SEO preservation part of a migration is we do a full kind of analysis of, okay, where is this organic traffic coming from, for what keywords, and then we can kind of put into priority order which of those keywords are we most interested in making sure we're keeping. Because it might be the case that, I don't know, you rank really well for ceramic. Well, actually, that's a terrible example. You rank really well for a keyword that no one's really searching for, and you're really proud
Might be
of it.
like a long tail keyword, for example.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. And something where you type it into Google and you're like, oh, look at that, fantastic. We're at number one for that. I don't want to lose that. But then if you actually dig into it, it turns out that no one's searching for that and no one's actually coming to the site through that keyword. So why bother doing that? But it might turn out that you've got a keyword which you don't even know about and everyone's turning up to your website on it, and
And
you
it converts really well, perhaps.
and it converts really well.
Yeah.
And you actually do not want to kind of mess that up. So
Well, that's
yeah,
part of like how to not lose sales and business during the migration process, isn't it? You know, but
yeah,
SEO, you're bound to take a little bit of a dip as Google recategorizes you on a new platform. But how do we minimize that, and how do we further optimize? Like you said, these are all the things that you rank for but aren't actually driving traffic or sales, and these are some things that are driving traffic and sales. So let's focus more on those.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
One thing again, really really irritating, but you've got an example, haven't you, of kind of like a reviews app, and with the order notifications, again, getting these little things right. If you're an established brand, like they can really not help the brand reputation or frustrate customers. But go on, explain what happened there.
Well, the first thing I want to say on this is we've done obviously many migrations, and not everyone's perfect. Sometimes things do go wrong, but we learn from our mistakes, and that's why yeah, we've had a great success rate for some time, and that's because we've made the mistakes in the past that we don't want anyone else to be making.
You didn't learn to walk by not falling over, did you?
Exactly, exactly.
Another one I've
Full of
stolen,
great,
by the way, not mine.
full of great phrases today, Andy. So the example I wanted to use, and this is really important because people miss this all the time, as we did years ago. One thing that people do usually know about, and Shopify make a big sing and dance about it, is that if you're importing a load of orders into a new Shopify site, you want to turn off the notifications that go out. Because if you've suddenly got a big kind of influx of orders being imported into your system as part of this migration, what you don't want is an email to keep going out to all these different customers going, thanks for your order, thanks for your order, thanks for your order, when they haven't made that order. They made that order 5 years in the past on your old Visualsoft website. And
well, if they were able to check out, of course.
and but people will often miss you're going to have lots of new apps on your Shopify store. You might have a review app, you might have your loyalty points app, all these different apps, and
Back
these
and
apps
stop
will quite,
notifications is another one, isn't it? You could.
yeah, exactly, yeah, and these apps will quite often they will send out automated emails to customers based on certain triggers. The reviews app is the example that sticks into my mind, where we did a migration some time ago, and we forgot to turn off the notifications on the review app, which then meant when we were importing, I think it was about 100,000 orders, but we noticed that these emails were going out from the review app, and it was like, hang on a second, why are these emails going out from the review app? And then it suddenly clicked, hang on a second, it's because the review app is set to trigger to send out a request for a review
On a fulfilled order.
every time the order's been come in and been fulfilled. So yeah, that is a key thing that people need to be looking out for: is what are the different apps? What are their triggers for sending out automated emails? And there
Mhm.
might be some other automations as well that they do. I don't know. And how are they going to behave when you've suddenly got a ton of orders or customers or whatever being imported into the system?
Great.
Yeah.
Um, there's a topic here which is kind of minimizing downtime. So the actual migration time itself is or the actual bulk of the migrations itself. You're probably going to be running both stores in parallel and be able to do that without any downtime. But there's always the kind of pre-launch top-up migration that's going to capture anything that's happened since. So there's a couple of things that you can do. Like to minimize that, you might want to have like a code freeze or like a data freeze where you don't add new products, you don't add new categories, you don't add new attributes for a time before the launch of the new store. That would sort of reduce the amount of top-up migrations that you need to do. You're not going to be able to stop orders. You're not going to be able to stop customers. You're not going to be able to stop subscriptions, loyalty points, all the things we've talking about. But yeah, what are some strategies there to minimize that downtime and reduce that top-up migration?
Well, as you kind of touched upon there, one of the things we can do is a content freeze. So that's just making sure that internally in your organization, where people are adding products, content, whatever, that they just stop for a certain amount of time, and that kind of then links into the overall uh, what do we call it, timeline of events as to how we're going to do things.
Mm-hmm.
Because once we've, exactly as you say, once we've kind of frozen that content, no one's changing it, we can then import that into the new system and be confident it's not going to go out of sync because it's the same. So those are things that we can, basically there's things we can control, and because we can, let's control those. There's things that we can't control, and we have to figure out strategies around how we're going to keep everything in sync. And by in sync, I mean making sure that that data is synchronized. So when at the time of switching over, the orders or the customers are the same on one side as they are on the other, and we haven't lost any or whatever. Um, so yeah, there's various strategies around which how we can do that. Um, there's the top up migration, as you say.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that we can do as well, and this really depends on how business critical the website is, how many transactions are going through it. You can have a slight bit of downtime, of course, and within that time frame, you are migrating the data across.
I think it's almost, if you're a reasonably heavy trading store, putting the store into some sort of maintenance mode to stop orders. Obviously,
Yeah,
that can be planned with your marketing teams. You pausing all your advertising or your paid advertising, but actually stopping those orders at some point to migrate and do that final top up migration and then switching the domain to the new store. There's going to be a little bit of downtime.
yeah,
I think it's almost impossible not to have it. There's a couple of things that can help you there, like the domain TTL. You can turn those down to about a minute, I think.
yeah,
So the time it takes your domain to repoint to the new service, as opposed to leaving it at the default, which is sometimes like 24 hours or 48 hours sometimes. So yeah, prepping things like that. Also, maybe looking to do the switch on at a less peak period for you. So you certainly don't want to be doing them in peak sales times. You don't want to be doing them peaks of the week. If you sell most on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you want to maybe move this to a weekday. If you're busier in the day than you are in the evening, depends whether you're a global business or a more local business. But all of those things are part of this migration. And you can see from this conversation how it's getting further and further fleshed out, that there's a lot to consider here. And that's why we wanted to put this together. If you move just forward, lastly, to sort of post migration, you've mentioned here there's some key metrics to look at. We've obviously spoken about SEO, so how you rebound from an SEO ranking point of view. That's going to be really important. What other key metrics would you want to look for?
Well, I think overall, I want to make sure orders are coming in at the very least. um, Also, I think it can be worth looking at conversion rate as well, because if the convert, so obviously you can get a live kind of conversion rate in Shopify, and if that's you can't really be looking at that in the short term, because if you've got 5 customers have come through in the last 10 minutes, there's not really enough data. But over the course of like several hours, if the conversion rate is kind of looking a bit odd compared to what it would normally be, then you might want to kind of investigate that.
But there might be a balancing point there as well, in that customers are faced with a new experience. So even though they may be a returning customer, they could be faced with a new interface or a new user experience that makes them, not as familiar to check out as they would have been. So that might iron out over time.
Yeah. What other things would you typically be looking at?
Well, if products sort of top sellers, are they still still the top sellers? Are they still easily found? Sometimes like search results as well. So if your common searches are for certain products, are they still delivering? Are they still firing? Because we've spoken about like moving in that order data, and some of that order data helps power recommendations. So if recommendations are made based on previous order history, previous browsing history, you may lose the browsing history for a short term, but you may retain the order history for the long term. So keeping an eye on those things, I think, are important.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you mentioned also, like, I think it's that communication piece with the customer, isn't it? That you don't want them to come to an unfamiliar experience, try and log into their account, and not be able to because they need to reset their password. So we even need to communicate that really well with emails leading up to the migration and the launch, or we need to have messaging on the site that then tells them we've changed our underlying platform, you may need to reset your password, that sort of thing.
Yes. So yeah, that's is a really good point actually. So when you migrate customers over to another platform, they're going to want to log into their customer accounts, and usually the password will change because obviously you can't change.
Well, they're encrypted, aren't they? A lot of them, so
Yeah.
we're not able to move them over with most platforms.
Yeah, and the best thing to do really is to send out emails to customers explaining in very simple terms. Um, this is your accounts have been migrated. You'll just need to reset your passwords,
Mm-hmm.
and pretty much as simple as that, and make the process as easy as possible for them. Um, Again, that's something else that quite often gets missed. It's like, oh, we've set up a new website, customers will work it out. Well, quite
Well,
often
and
they do.
there are some platforms that let you en masse trigger a password reset email.
Yeah.
Make sure you use that as an opportunity. We've spoken about this before with Chloe, but that email should also be a big celebration of why you've moved platforms, what new things you've got,
Yep.
what advantages are there for customers. And also, by the way, here's how you reset your password. So you just click this link to reset it. So some platforms en masse will let you send that out to all your customers, a password reset email. So that's going to do the job of marketing your new website, not upsetting customers when they try and log in, and will drive traffic to the new store. So you've got some, a big influx of data and users to test out on.
Absolutely. Well, within e-commerce, any opportunity to send out an email to a customer and make a sing and dance about your product should be taken advantage of, and this is a prime example, really. And if there's an action that they need to take to reset their password, then it's going to get them on your website, which is great news.
Okay, so if you're a e-commerce business owner, you work in e-commerce business as a career, then we're going to try and help with a couple of bits that you can take away and start doing today. So one of them is like a data map tool. Like we said before, one of the biggest things that you whether you're migrating or not, I think it's really useful to be able to say, these are all the data sets we hold, these are the systems that hold them, and this is what they hold. So it could be weight in kilos is held in our ERP, for example. Then in the future, if you ever need to move platform, you've got this data map that you can come to either an agency or your developers in-house and say, look, this is where everything is. This needs to move from here to here. This needs to stay where it is. And that kind of preparation is going to help save tons of time when you're trying to run a busy platform migration as it is. You don't necessarily want another thing on your plate that you could have prepped for in advance. So in the notes below, we're going to link to like a data map tool. It's a bit of a mind map of where all your product data and information is. I'm sure you can do those yourselves with your own tools if you want to, but it's just a guide to get you thinking. So that'll be available to download in the show notes. And you've got an example of the communications, haven't you?
Absolutely, yeah. So an example of an email to send out to customers, asking them to reset their password, get them back on the website.
And it's a Shopify specific example. So again, if you're looking to sort of nurture that relationship with your customers and make that transition easy for them, then hopefully that gives you something you can work with as well. So they'll both be available below.
Follow the Real E-commerce podcast and visit realagency.co.uk for more e-commerce content like this.